institutional memory that went back 70 years, and that was invaluable to them. There's a lot of wisdom that comes with that experience.
So much wisdom and so much discretion. If you remember the blue and yellow flowers that were discreetly behind her after Russia had invaded Ukraine, yes. She had a way of making her point, I think, which was unique. You know.
Dame Maureen Lipman, thank you for sharing your memories and thoughts. It's so nice to see you today.
Lovely to see you too. Thank you.
The state hearse still on its way, still with people on each side of the road, not going along the motorway but coming through the ordinary main roads that will go through the town centres before it gets to Windsor. And at Windsor, in the chapel, much of the congregation already sitting waiting for this family funeral. People who were close to the Queen, worked for the Queen, many again with the Royal Victorian Order medal. And there'll be music played, but the service doesn't actually begin for another hour and a half, and that hour and a half will be taken up with the procession up the Long Walk. A procession very like the one we saw in London, with the pipes and the drums and the bands and all that sort of glorious jewel-like surrounding of the coffin as they come up the Long Walk and into this west door, under the huge window, one of the largest stained glass windows in Britain, and the coffin will be borne up the steps and into the nave. The music's going to be played. It's interesting, the music they're going to play. There's one particular composer who was the organist here at the chapel, who not only played the organ here but has also provided music for the service itself, and he was here from the 30s until the 60s. The Queen herself used to go up into the organ loft there to listen to him play, and it's said that he actually taught Her Majesty the piano. Sir William Harris is called. But there's music also by Bach and Herbert Howells, Samuel Coleridge Taylor, modern music from Judith Weir, the current master of the King's Music, Elgar Vaughan Williams, all those famous British composers. But for the moment, it seems they sit in silence and just talk to each other. The banners of the Knights of the Garter. Now, interestingly, the 1000th Knight of the Garter, would you believe, was the Prince of Wales, who was Prince William then. He was appointed in 2008, the 1000th Knight of the Garter. It goes back centuries, and it's in the gift, or was in the gift of the sovereign, only given to people who've distinguished themselves in public life. Not all men. There are women, ladies of the Garter, they're called as well, and their banners hang here during their time when they're alive, when they come every year to this service here for the Garter, and then on their death the banner's taken down, but the seat that they have below in the choir, those brass plaques you can see, are there to commemorate their time as members of the order. There are 700 or 800 of them left here. Some have been taken down because history disapproved of them, others have just fallen down, but otherwise this extraordinary panoply of the Knights of the Garter, whose chapel this is. And the man responsible for all this is the most senior herald, Garter King of Arms, who made the principal proclamation of the King in St. James's Palace earlier this week, and here today will perform one of his final duties, which is to read out the Queen's styles and titles at the very end of the service. Garter King of Arms, and with the heralds, who nowadays play a mainly symbolic role at state occasions, but in the past figures of controversy who had to decide who was entitled to call themselves what and who owned what land, and got caught up in all kinds of shenanigans. Now as so many of the people that we see in the most brilliant colours here, enlivening these occasions, is actually there simply as a formal role which they play.
Now, someone who knows Windsor very well is the writer and historian William Shawcross. He's taken the time to join us. We're very grateful for that. You've spent a lot of time here. Sometimes it's been social times and sometimes it's been working times. We'll come to that in a second. But today, as somebody who spent a lot of time in the company of the Queen, what are your thoughts?
Well, I don't want to exaggerate and boast and say a lot, but I had an incredible honour from the Queen. She asked me to write the official biography of her mother.
And there was a 6-year period where you researched and wrote that.
Much of that time in this wonderful castle, in the round tower behind us, which is where the Royal Archives are.
Right.
And it was an extraordinary joy to read all these letters that had never been written, probably since they were never been read for 50, 60 years.
But didn't you spend time consulting with the Queen and saying, this is what I've found and what do you make of that and is that accurate? So you would take tea with her and you would exchange your research and ask for her opinion?
Yes, she would ask me to tea either here or sometimes at Balmoral if that was, my wife and I went to stay there several times. But you're right, and I would say, look at this letter, ma'am, do you remember this? And she would say, oh yes, this is why I wrote that, or this is why my mother wrote this to me, or to so-and-so. I got to know her. I was, as I say, very privileged and unlucky to do so.
I mean, you're a very distinguished writer, but that must have been quite nerve-wracking.
It was, but nerve-wracking in theory, but actually the first time after I'd met her, I realised what an extraordinarily kind and gentle person she was, and she always put everybody at their ease. There was never any side to her. It was always gentle and wise and incredibly decent in every sense of the word.
So you had access to this archive, and there were letters between the Queen and the very young Queen and the Queen Mother. I need to ask you a question that has been bothering me because I've read it in 2 or 3 books, which is, during the war, did the Queen Mother sign her letters "Tinkety Tonk Old Fruit and Down with the Nazis"?
She did.
She did?
She did. She didn't sign all her letters like that.
Okay.
If she was writing to the Queen, to Princess Elizabeth, she would say, "With much love from your loving Mama."
Right.
But to friends and cousins, not all of them, and certainly not to formal letters, she would say, "Tinkety Tonk and down with the Nazis."
Right.
And she had this wonderful habit of raising her glass to people she loved and say, "Let's now drink to Winston Churchill." And then raise our glasses to Winston Churchill, and let's lower our glasses to the Nazis.
When you were a house guest, you say both here at Windsor, overnight stay, what were they called? Dine and sleeps, I think.
Dine and sleep.
Very posh sleepover.
Yeah, yes, very posh, of course. Being asked to sleep here is very posh. One of the other guests who was there the night that my wife and I were here had a Canaletto in his bedroom. Well, that's pretty posh.
That is pretty posh.
Wonderful.
Right.
And beautiful.
It's working, but not entirely.